Hello again, all my YouTube folks. I just had kind of another idea for a video sitting here, so I thought I would film a third one and maybe a fourth one over at the hotspot, if I make it there. It might rain today, so I have to be careful carrying my notebook around and stuff. My car isn't currently registered or insured, so I can't really drive it around during the day too much. This is going to be annoying things the well-off say to the poor, or in my case, other Gen Xers or Boomers would likely say to someone like me. Now, it is important to note that I am a Gen Xer. I am 46 years old, and Gen X seems to have escaped the generation kind of hate, but because I'm Gen X and I'm unemployed, I'm actually having to, well, underemployed, let's say, I'm actually having to deal with a lot of the same problems that millennials and Gen Z are. So I'm in kind of a weird bracket, you know. My age says Gen X, my current situation kind of screams Gen Z or millennial, right? Okay, now I hear these aren't necessarily in any specific order. I've quit trying to do that. It's easier just to make a list. So number one, why don't you take a course or get a degree or go back to school or get a certification, i.e. spend money you don't have for something that is a crapshoot. It's been proven pretty much that degrees and certificates don't necessarily get you anywhere anymore. I have a relative who just graduated with a degree in a tech field, and you know, he's not having any easier a time finding a job than anyone else is. Okay. I also just a few years ago kind of got out of my student loan debt, and I'm not in a situation where I'm going to get scholarships or grants or anything like that, and I'm just simply not willing to take on more student loan debt. I'm sorry. And do free courses really matter? I mean, if they were worthwhile, it seems like they would probably cost something. I mean, I'm not trying to say they aren't, but just the mentality of, well, you can always learn something new is great, but I'm just not in a situation where I can A, spend money on that, or B, really waste my brain's bandwidth on that. You are just not as capable as you were when you 20 years ago. I'm 46. I am not as capable of learning as quickly as I was when I was 26. Things always take me a little longer now. You generally kind of degrade in your physical abilities as you age, not get, I'm slower as a guitarist. I'm not getting older and faster, It's just weird that boomers especially kind of talk about this stuff like, oh, this person must have savings. We'll get to that later, okay? But the whole, oh, why don't you just indebt yourself further to get this thing that probably won't guarantee anything for you while you are struggling to pay your rent right now is just silly, Number two, the fact that you aren't wealthy is all on you. Well, I mean, I guess it could be, but not everyone out there can be an entrepreneur. I have a great idea for a business. Several people have told me that, but there are several aspects of business I struggle with understanding how to do properly. As I've mentioned before, if I were good at marketing things, I would probably have, 1 million subscribers to my channel, not 127. And again, kind of what is wealth, I guess? What are we considering wealthy? I mean, I guess everything that happens is on you, but just because somebody's wealthy, in my mind, doesn't necessarily mean they earned it. There is a lot of inherited wealth out there. In fact, this year's supposed to be like the biggest transference of inherited wealth that has ever been. So that's a nice thing to say, but I think that really wealthy people tend to say that to make themselves feel less guilty for being wealthy. Not, I guess, that you should feel guilty for feeling wealthy, but, you know, just most people are never going to be that. That's just not most people. And, you know, the way that companies sort of lay people off and decide who they're going to keep and who they're going to get rid of these days is just very haphazard compared to how it used to be. Number three, you just aren't working hard enough. People work 2 or 3 jobs these days. I generally carry 2 jobs, my telecom job and then whatever other one I can get. You know, when I'm working both those jobs, have very, very little free time. Behave. Be good. I'm filming a thing. You know I'm filming a thing. Why? Because it's self-therapy. Just be good. So yeah, most people are working 2 or 3 jobs these days. How that could equate to you're not working hard enough is very beyond me. And that mentality is kind of mean and not very nice, I think. Now, are we always working 2 or 3 jobs? No. But, I mean, come on. I don't even feel like we should have to work 2. What do you think? He said don't care. Why? Well, I mean, you don't work a job, so... You gonna go? Thank you. Come back in here in like 7 minutes. Yeah, you just aren't working hard enough. There's no way people aren't working hard enough. I know people who do nothing but work and still can't make ends meet. It has a lot to do with what you're making, what you're doing, you know, and there are all kinds of variables that can have you doing. I mean, most people aren't lucky enough to do what their degree field is in these days. So, number 4, hear this a lot from boomers. The world hasn't changed that much in the last 50 years. Whatever. The time where you could just go into a company and hand in a resume and have a conversation with somebody and walk out of there with a job hasn't been for a long time. Okay? What's a reality for people like me is, you know, anybody remember those 400 question assessments just to get a job at, I don't know, Walmart in the late 90s? And then that kind of went away for a while, and now that's starting to come back, you know? The whole, like, hey, you guys are hiring, and then you get told to, you know, immediately go apply online and everything like that. The fact that money is worth 10 times less than it was in the 60s. I mean, you guys do realize that a dollar back in 1960 was worth $10. You know, that inflation has just run rampant for the last 50 years. And it's like because older folks are kind of grandfathered into a system, they just don't, because they are. You're always kind of grandfathered into the system you started working in one way or another. Maybe not in every way, but in one way or another. I know a couple of older folks who have had to apply for jobs recently, and they've just been completely surprised how, you know, just inhumane it's become, the whole interview and application process. Number 5. You just need to find a good job and keep it. Well, what's a good job? You know? because I would call a good job at least $20 an hour these days. But a lot of jobs are still paying 12, 13. I mean, this $15 an hour minimum wage that Bernie Sanders is fighting for, I mean, bless him, thank you. But a lot of businesses have been paying that already, and it's not enough. It is not enough to make ends meet for most people that want to. I mean, I'm kind of at the point where I'm tired of living in this RV and stuff. You know, I would like a little bit more. But that's just not foreseeable with the type of jobs I tend to get. It's also not foreseeable to start paying somebody $20 an hour to pour coffee or put things on a grocery store shelf. And I get that. You know, when I worked at a grocery store for $7.75 an hour, I thought, well, I mean, putting stuff on a shelf isn't worth a whole lot more. Now, when they started adding more people's jobs on me, that changed. But while they were just having me do my position, I was like, I mean, that's pretty fair compensation. And you could still get by on that. Even you could almost get by on $7.75 an hour in 2013 if you budgeted well. I mean, just here 10 years later, that's practically nothing. That's impoverished if you make that. And a lot of the grocery stores are paying that. Had an interview with Tom Thumb recently, and they were pretty much telling me at the interview that they were going to stack 3 or 4 people's work on me, and I was only going to be making $13.40 an hour. I mean, I guess I'd be happy to make that right now, but it hasn't been 7 minutes, but okay. But at the same time, that just means I'm going to have to work something else. You know, it's not enough. So, you know, what's a good job? You know, the other factor behind that is just a lot of us aren't as capable as we were when we were 20. I've discussed my slew of musculoskeletal injuries, partly due to working, you know, manual labor and retail all my life, that, you know, have kind of kept me from functioning as well as I did when I was in my 20s. I don't have a particularly good right sciatica from sitting in call center chairs for, you know, 13 years either. And as I mentioned, the whole skeleton crew mentality is kind of ruining that. You know, older folks also tend to have more going on. You generally have more going on with your family and things like that when you're in your 40s or 50s versus your 20s or 30s. So, you know, there's more that takes your time away from work. You know, people just aren't all about living to work. And I'm not one of those people who feels like you should have to be. The skeleton crew mentality is a huge problem because, I mean, it essentially just means that you're getting a demotion, right? Rather than getting $13.40 an hour for one job, you're getting $13.40 an hour for 4 jobs. Number 6, you just need to get some savings built up. Saving, I mean, just look up some other videos on this. Saving has become just almost impossible for most Americans. Living by yourself has become almost impossible at some of the lower wages they're trying to pay. With the average rent on a 1-bedroom apartment in this country right now, I heard somewhere was like $1,700. It's not in the DFW area, but I saw a place down here on East Chase that was $995 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment. You know, that's a lot of money. Back during my first relationship, we had a 2-bedroom apartment, and we paid $720 for that. You know, a 2-bedroom, we paid $720 for. That seemed really fair. You know, 1-bedroom and studio apartments were kind of in the 300s and 400s back then, and you just you're probably going to pay almost $1,000 for a studio now. You're probably going to pay that $720 that we were paying for a 2-bedroom for a studio. And studio apartments are also very hard to find. They're just not as common as you think they are. Most apartment places don't even have them. Just saving's almost impossible unless you're living with 3 or 4 other people. And number 7, I mentioned this a little bit previously in the video. You need to go places to apply. Take your resume in. This has literally almost never worked for me. I mean, for places that say apply within, I have certainly done that, but almost nowhere says that now. Maybe some, shitty mom and pop, seafood restaurant, but, who wants to do that? Not only who wants to do that, but who can afford to do that? It's probably like a $10 an hour job, These days, you go in someplace to apply, you almost get immediately told to apply online, and you're lucky if it's not artificial intelligence looking at your application and resume these days. There's, again, usually a fairly long assessment that's involved now that a lot of people simply don't have the time or bandwidth for, and a lot of them are repeat questions trying to trick you, I know people who've just bailed on an app, like, I'm not doing this, it's too involved, They also have that STAR method of interviewing kind of since the early 2000s, where situation, task, I don't remember all the bullshit anymore, but it's like you've got to tell a frickin' story every time you talk about a problem, and it's just so removed and inhuman, But yeah, the whole I've given my resume and stuff to a few places that I've applied for online, and it hasn't gotten me anywhere, and as I've mentioned before, the whole ghost job thing is like 6 out of 10 jobs now. So, you stand a pretty good chance of your resume getting put on a desk and used as like a fucking coaster rather than, somebody actually looking at it, I handed my resume to a Starbucks just because, I applied for something there. And the guy was like, oh yeah, we don't actually have that. I'll take it though. And, he took it to his office, and I'm sure he's never looked at it if it didn't go straight in the trash right there. I think the wealthy need to just kind of get their heads out of their asses a bit, because, they ought to consider themselves pretty lucky these days. And a lot of people say it. If you're wealthy, you probably didn't get there on your own. It's very unlikely that anybody gets anywhere they got on their own these days. You may have gotten there on your own in the past, and you might be lucky enough to stay there on your own, but I mean, I know some self-made people who are kind of starting to have some trouble in today's economy. Anyway, 7 things that the wealthy say to the poor that just don't make a whole lot of sense all the time anymore. Goemonronin signing out with a brief appearance from Joe this time. Thank you for watching to the end if you did, and please subscribe to my channel. Leave ideas for future videos in the comments. Have a great Memorial Day.